Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Resource Gatherer podcast. I'm your host, Justin Hayward. With me today is our guest star, Cody. For those of you who don't know Cody, Cody has been on a lot of the The Gathering channel podcast stuff. He's been on D&D, shooting some of the one-shots. He's been on some of the earlier editions of our casual play. So you've definitely heard his voice if you haven't seen his face. Anything you want to say, Cody?
Nah, man, just happy to be here. I love playing with you. I love playing this game. Love playing all these games, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So for today's topic, we're going to dive into a little bit of what we talked about last week, which was Homebrew. Cody actually is going to talk about one of the elements that he came up with, his One Piece sort of Homebrew style campaign. And we're also going to be talking a little bit about anime in general. And that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode of the Resource Gatherer podcast. So before we start into this sort of dive into the idea of your One Piece campaign, first thing I got to ask you, Cody, what is your favorite anime? Like top 5?
Oh, man, top 5. So I got into it when I was a kid, and, Dragon Ball Z was like the biggest thing on the planet. Goku just went Super Saiyan, like total badass. Like I remember being a kid, like my hair like standing up because you get the goosebumps just thinking about it. Then I got older, started watching some other stuff. I really liked Yu Yu Hakusho a lot. I like that dark tournament style combat, which also integrates into what I like a lot in D&D. I like combat-based stuff like that. I also really loved One Piece. Started it about 2 years ago because all my friends that were like, dude, you got to check it out. It's just a big commitment. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, at that time, it was like 850 episodes. Now it's 1,072. And it's awesome. The live action just came out. It was super well done. It skips over a lot of stuff because I also understand it's 8 episodes, but it gets through like 65 episodes of the anime. Rurouni Kenshin, I liked a lot. Fairy Tail. I like the heavier combat ones a lot. I'm not so much of like the simple role play stuff like that. For me, like when I sit down, I want to watch it. I want to watch the action unfold. I want to watch like just the intensity of like the creativity, which is why I really like the One Piece because, oh yeah, you're watching a movie and it's like, oh, this is totally going to happen. And then left field.
Yeah.
Didn't see that coming.
So for me, I think I kind of take it to the opposite approach. I'm really big on story elements in anime and just in general. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think my number one anime of all time is still going to be Fullmetal Alchemist. I think I've watched it since OG. I remember when the manga came out. I lived in Japan at the time whenever I was originally like reading the mangas as a kid. And I was just falling in love with how good the story was. And then whenever it obviously became the anime adaptation, I was able to watch it first in Japan and then watch it over here. But I absolutely loved Fullmetal Alchemist. Brotherhood was phenomenal. It actually sticks with the manga. From there, Hunter x Hunter is probably one of my favorites. Created by the same guy who did Yu Yu Hakusho, if you didn't know, for those at home. Absolutely one of the best. I think Yu Yu Hakusho was a really great story about... Because I like the earlier elements of Yu Yu. I like where it was like a detective-based story plot. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of delved from that style into the tournament arc in sort of more... battle manga style series, which is what you probably more enjoyed than I probably would have.
The best arc for me in that show was when they went to the castle.
Oh, yeah. So
Maze Castle, like that one was great because he just developed the friendships with Kurama and Hiei, and Kuwabara, the goofy sidekick, which people either love him or they hate him. I'm one of those rare people. I'm like, I can tolerate him, but like I definitely think like Hiei's the best guy in that entire show. But.
Yeah, so I really liked Kuwabara as an adult. As a kid, I understand what you were saying. So as a kid, I hated Kuwabara. I was like, he's just basically knockoff Yusuke. But as an adult, I understood because Kuwabara, even though he was like his rival, he ends up becoming like his ride or die. Literally dies for Yusuke.
Yeah.
During the Dark Tournament arc. So it was like really, really interesting to see how that friendship sort of developed. Number 3, my number 3 slot's got to go to Death Note.
Okay.
Death Note manga was amazing. I really liked how that story sort of came to be. Another one I'm going to bring up is one that you probably haven't heard of. It's called Byakuman.
I've heard of that.
So I think I've talked to you about it. So
Yeah.
essentially, it's created by the same people who did Death Note, but it's about two young. And I talked about this on the Talk Nerdy to Me podcast before we sort of switched over to this, where it's two middle school kids who want to become manga artists, and rather than traditional manga battles of like fighting against people, it's more focused, streamlined on the idea of like they're competing with their art. And that was really, really interesting take on how to compete against battle manga in a space where you're obviously using a lot of like traditional story elements. You don't have that flair that you could use of like, oh, I have superpowers. Number 5, Haiku. I didn't think I would like a sports anime until I sat down and watched Haiku. I remember watching it on Netflix and I was like, the art, the style, the rivalry, it was just so different than anything I'd seen before. I was like, this is it. This is king. So that's my top 5. As you can see, our styles are very different. So just like Shazan and I, Cody and I have very different backgrounds. So we're going to be bringing that sort of element in today's episode. So transitioning from our favorite animes, you obviously talked about One Piece a few times, and obviously that's going to be the main topic of today's sort of episode. So let's get into it. So how did you create your One Piece? Your One Piece one shot, or however you created your campaign?
So I was watching the show, and I made this campaign like I think like a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's been a while. I had to end it because work schedule, stuff like that. Whatever. But like I pulled it together because I'm watching the show, and the more I played D&D, because I'm still relatively newer to D&D, compared to a lot of people. Like you've been playing for a decade plus.
Yeah, I think your first campaign was my campaign, right?
Yeah, and that was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, about 3 years ago. So Cody and I met at our local game store, and I was playing a game of D&D with a bunch of new people. I just moved here to the Ohio region, and Cody actually was sitting in and watching us play, and he was really interested. And I was like, "Hey, man, you want to jump in a game?" And he's absolutely a phenomenal player. Anyone who could have Cody in their game would be happy to have him. He pays attention, he takes notes, and he shows up and plays his character. That was really the main thing that I loved about Cody, and it's why I keep bringing him back for everything that I do whenever he has opportunity. So,
no, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, because me and you talk about that all the time. Like, like a situation arises, and it's one of the hardest things that anybody in a D&D campaign can do. It's like, what would Justin do, opposed to what would Justin's character do?
Yeah,
and you have to commit to be like, yeah. I mean, like, and me, like I fully commit in there, like between like my best character of all time, Mozzie, the paladin from the underworld, pretty much. Like that dude committed to everything he did, and the party didn't like it half the time because they're like, dude, you was crazy, but it was fun. But yeah, so like I involved those. Like I'm watching the D&D campaign, then I'm watching One Piece at home, and I'm like, there's so many correlations we can add. Because like you go through the character developments, like you look at the show, like Luffy is your basic monk. He's broke all the time. All he cares about is like his goal. He has his, punch attacks everywhere. Cool. Zoro, easily he's a paladin.
I could go paladin or I can go fighter, just because of the fact that he's using multi-attack, especially such early level. Because I would say that Zoro base is probably like a level 4. Probably a level 4 fighter, and then he's using multi-attack already because he's dual wielding.
Because I look at him as a fighter first, but then you look deeper into him when they go into his backstory and his arc and his oath and everything that he takes. That's why I classify him more as a paladin. And then when he does like those crazy like finishing moves, that is like divine smite to me all day.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So like I said, I would say base level, you could see him being, but that's where the similarities between paladins and fighters really in the early levels, you could see that very close similarity. It's not really until you get into magic and the essence that magic brings that I could see that transition. So yeah, absolutely, I can understand that.
Same thing with Usopp. He starts off as a ranger, but then he eventually becomes like a soft artificer. Because like he creates like that stick for Nami, he creates different his own shots and bullets and stuff like that. Not like hard into artificing, but like he does like when he fights Luffy, when they have their one-on-one fight over the
Oh, yeah,
Owen
yeah,
Mary,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, he like sets up the thing with traps and different things like that. Like,
Yeah,
so he
yeah.
has like those like soft aspects of it, which is what I like. Like, I like when players commit to like, I'm a paladin, I'm sticking with paladin. I'm a sorcerer, I'm sticking with sorcerer. But I also do appreciate when they take 1 or 2 points into something else just to round out their character for like development, either what they did in the campaign or what they think would just be cool for character development.
Yeah, and so like Chopper obviously is a doctor. Like,
Yeah,
and
it's cleric all day.
oh, so
No, druid.
he's a druid because he shapeshifts.
Yes.
So that was the biggest thing with Chopper. Chopper's the easiest one. He's got natural nature abilities and he's got natural medicine because he's got plus to wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's just super, super dumb outside of that. So low int, high wisdom. He loves cotton candy. So
Yeah.
we have to accept that as like just part of his character. So yeah, so speaking of like, so obviously, yeah, so when you start breaking down any story or any style of story, that's kind of like how I've started approaching every single D&D story. Like, look at something that you really enjoy, be like, how do I break that apart? I've actually done pirate campaigns, and I will say that the Island Hopper style fits really nicely in session-based campaigns where you're just focusing on like, okay, here's this week's goals, focus on, well, that was one of the ones you guys get to play in where you started playing in the Island Hopper adventure in the later ends of your first campaign playing with me.
So on that, like most people, like when they first start playing D&D, they do like the Waterdeep campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a nice mix between role playing and combat. You know, that way you can kind of see what you like more. You can kind of go back and forth. But like every other campaign that people play in, most of the time you're based off in one city. Okay. And then when you're in that city, like I'm going to use Waterdeep, for example, you get that hotel or the mansion. You get the mansion. That's your base of operations and everything. And that city is your general principle. Like, you know, okay, I know the magic shops over here. I know the medics over here, you know, all the different stuff. Well, you have to essentially take that city and condense it into the ship.
Yeah.
Because that's the hardest part about building a pirate campaign. People go like, oh yeah, on the pirate ship, all of a sudden, like they forget that they need to have like an armory. They have to have some type of infirmary. They have to have all like, you know, living quarters, food, different things like that. And it's easy to forget those things because you're not used to that play style. So like when I built this ship in my mind, I'm like, okay, like we're going to have this level, this level, this level. I mean, it's a massive ship that I made these guys go on.
Okay, and so how do they start? So in your campaign, then because see, my understanding, how I've done pirate style campaigns in the past is, it started off small. You're on like a dinghy, and you sort of just maneuver. And how you get those elements of the story is you just go to the next town, and the town would have those elements, and in between, you kind of have to like rough it out until you get there. But based off of what you're saying you started off with this giant cityscape ship. And then you're just a traveling ship going from place to place to place. So then how do you incorporate these new players? Are they just people who join the ship as like new crewmates? Or how do you incorporate those roles into the story so they feel like they're starting off small in those low low roles, but also able to progress to eventually become the captains, the first mates, etc.?
Yeah. So I started off that there's, you know, their captain. You know, and he's in charge of the ship and he has like his lieutenants and stuff like that. And your characters start off as low level, like, you know, essentially peons. Okay. You know? And I gave my characters 3 choices to choose from for how they want to start it. They had to let me know beforehand, and I incorporated that into the starting story. So one character, he was already a member of the crew. So he was on the ship. That's how he wanted to be. And by starting on the ship, he had more favoritism, like with the captain or the first mate, because like, oh yeah, he's already proved himself. You know, think of like when people join gangs, you know, like they're the new people or they're the people that have already earned like their respect.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Next guy, their option was to wash up like on a dinghy. You know, they're just kind of like their ship went down, they're in the middle of the ocean, and you grab them. Well, their perk was they started off with a random low-level magical item, you know, like a bag of holding or something, you know, real basic like that. It was like a family heirloom of theirs. And they got to know an additional language because they're off, you know, makes sense. The third one I really pulled in from the One Piece campaign because when I was building this, it was right around the time Foxy showed up and they were doing the Davy back fights.
Oh, I love
So we had it literally end, like the campaign starts at the end of a Davy back fight.
Ooh, okay.
And lo and behold, your random player got selected
Yeah, so my question then is based off of the way that you sort of portrayed this. Obviously, pirates have an evil indication. They obviously have this sort of evil mentality whenever they go into these worlds. How were you able to take the One Piece mentality of where not all pirates are bad, or did your players just play into we're all evil because we're pirates?
Well, so the other aspect that I made them decide before, other than the way they were going to be joining the crew, was I also made them come up with the core principle of One Piece of what is your overall goal, you know. So like one of them, he wanted to be the number 2 guy in the world, the number 1, number 2.
Mm.
He's like, because if you're number 1, everyone guns after you. He's like, so I want to be the number 2.
So really like the Afro samurai mentality of just have the number 2 headband, but like reverse because everyone goes for the number 2 because no one can get the number 1.
Exactly. I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, you're going to make it so much harder on you. So of course, like I made it extra difficult on him. One, because he's just a great player and he can adapt like that. But two, I just thought it'd be really funny just to watch like the vein pop out of his head.
Was this Patrick?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So fun fact, whenever I played with Patrick, because Patrick does actually watch some of our TikToks,
Yeah.
so this might actually show up. He actually messaged me. He's like, dude, I saw you and Shazad were doing stuff, and he's like, I didn't know you guys were still making content. It's weird seeing Shazad's face. I was like, oh well, surprise, buddy. We're real. We're on the internet. But when we were playing in our campaign together, Patrick had a really keen sense of like. Obviously, I had the most experience at the table, so I just kept messing with Patrick. My whole goal every session was, how do I break Patrick so I can just do the weird stuff I wanted to do? So, like, with the whole pretending to be a guard or whatever, I was just like, yeah, because I was a Genasi, and they're obviously weird looking, and this was a bandit camp, and I was just like, yeah, I'm your replacement. And I was a Genasi warlock, so I had high charisma, and so I ended up having to roll for it, got a natural 20, and they're like, yeah, I guess you are relieved because if anyone who's been in the service or has any sort of military background would know.
Yep.
For militia, whenever your relief shows up, you don't question the relief; you just leave.
Yeah. You're like, I'm done. I'm out.
And so then he tried to bring some guards in to eventually stop me with the DM's power, and I pretended there was a dragon attack, and the rest of the players at the table decided to feed into that idea, and so the dragonborn's pretending to breathe fire and scream draconic. And I start lighting stuff on fire with my firebolt cantrip, and I'm pretending that I am bleeding, and we're acting, and it just became like a whole thing. So it's fun how interesting like story points can go, but we're devolving a little bit here. So getting back to your story, so
yeah, I made them like all come up with their own goals and different things like that. So like, yes, you're part of a crew. Like it's like essentially your family. You're going to take care of each other. You're going to look out for each other, and essentially. Their captain, he was just kind of out there, like not so much to plunder and take care, like, take over villages and stuff like that. He was just like out to get rich. We'd pull up to little islands and stuff like that. Be like, hey, go check it out. And whatever you found, you had to bring it back to him, pay your taxes. And the higher rank you got, the more gold you got to get or more valuables you got to get and stuff like that.
Okay. So
the other really cool part about it was I also, based on your rank structure, so the person that started with them first, he got more gold than the other people.
Okay.
So for those people that, have spending problems, you definitely want to prove your worth and get up there faster, but like everyone also got assigned the job just like they do on the One Piece episode. Like Patrick's character, he had to go with the cooks.
Oh, okay.
He literally had to get up earlier than everyone and cook food and cook breakfast and stuff like that. And sometimes he made the best eggs they've ever had. I think the first time he rolled a natural 20 and everyone's like praising his name. Then the next morning he rolled like a 2, burnt the shit out of everything. Like
so that's interesting that you still made them roll even though they should have certain proficiencies with the job, just because ultimately like it could have been out of his hands. Maybe the eggs were bad that he had to cook or whatever. So then based off of that, did you actually incorporate any of the actual One Piece characters into the story at all? Or were you looking to build that in? How are you looking to incorporate that element?
So I essentially incorporated like some of the core characters, not so much like the combat characters, but like I brought in like a Nami character where one of the characters, they had to be a part of the navigation. They were responsible for looking for maps, like different things like that. Like whenever they got to islands, Another character was a cook. Another character had to deal with like the inventory, like a quartermaster. So they had to help make sure like things were stocked and taken care of. And then I had another character that worked with the medical tent.
Okay.
And I mostly focused a lot on what their character proficiencies were, and I kind of assigned them that way. Like one was a druid, so I put them closer with like the infirmary stuff because they had a lot of natural healing abilities. Our combat person, they were really big, like in like fighting and different things like that. So I put them with the war master and the quartermaster, because that would make the most sense to try to get first dibs or things like that. So, and then the navigator, that was definitely, I think, a spellcaster.
Okay.
And high intelligence, able to like understand maps and different things like that. So
you wouldn't think that your navigator would need. Well, I mean, I guess Arcana makes sense when it comes to that, but high perception would probably be really important in that role too, wouldn't it? Because you're overseeing what's happening, changes in nature and in the weather and stuff. So, my question to you then is: so it sounds like you sort of adapted D&D into these elements. So, how did you adapt Devil Fruit in hockey, or how would you in a game like this of Homebrew?
So we didn't get too far into it for the hockey aspect of it, but I did incorporate the Devil Fruit. So for Devil Fruits, I didn't give them like random stretchy ability like Luffy or chop fruit, nothing like that, because that's just gonna break that game 7 ways from Sunday, and that's just too much. So instead, I gave them a random feat.
Okay, so you incorporated the feat aspect. So that's interesting. So the feat became the devil fruit, and so then could you have more than one devil fruit to get additional feats, or how did that work?
So unlike the anime where you're only allowed to have one devil fruit, which totally makes sense because I can't imagine Luffy having, the flame and the gum, like that'd be just busted beyond busted. But in this one, whenever you hit a new level that you were able to get an ability score improvement or choose a feat, you were eligible to eat another devil fruit.
And so how did you acquire these devil fruits then? Were they difficult or?
Sometimes they were difficult. Sometimes they were easy. The easier ones obviously are the low level ones that give you like the not so good abilities. Because the more you eat, the higher up on the pole I'm going to give you on stuff.
Okay.
Like you're not going to get the first one and then you're going to have like, Warcaster, spell.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But like the early ones, like you were able to have like, I'm drawing a blank on what it was.
Yeah. So like there are certain tiers, I guess, of feats that I would describe them. For example, a feat where like Lucky Feat would be probably one of the best feats.
Yeah, that'd be an S tier.
Same thing with like Sentinel, Warcaster, etc. Where like the lower tier feats would be like
the language one, like the linguist feat or whatever. I think that was a low level one that I gave somebody.
Or like proficiency with like improvised weapons, like just throwing or the tavern brawler, like where you just get to throw stuff at people. Like it's not necessarily great in depending on the game, but for low level adventurers, that's a great feat where you can just be like, all right, I'm gonna pick up the chair and I'm gonna chair this guy like it was a WWE match.
Yeah,
like that's great. So
and it also will incorporate them with like low levels, like people are gonna try to bully you around and stuff like that, and you might be able to win the situation like based upon that stuff.
So then, if they got the access to the devil fruits, did they also take the negative of being unable to swim when they ate it?
So yes, the first thing was you lost your ability to swim.
Okay,
but if you ate more, you essentially start losing more stuff. Like I would take other things away from their character, and that's a big thing about being a DM is like having access to your character sheets, because, like say they were a dwarf and they ate a devil fruit, they lose the ability to swim. Well, dwarves don't care. They don't like water anyway. So now they're like, yeah, I definitely can't go there. Cool, no problem. Well, say they eat another one. Well, I might take away a random language that they know.
Ooh.
And now that advantage you had now is a negative. Then say you ate another one or 3 or 4, because there's about 4. How many ability score improvements can we have? Like 6?
Up to level 20?
Yeah, up to level 20. But so there's like 6 total.
Yeah, so it's every 4th level.
So 5.
So 5 total.
Yeah, say you ate your 3rd or your 4th one, I might take your dark vision away.
Yeah, and so
and but you got to be getting those higher level feats, and just like in One Piece, like not everyone eats one because they're like being a pirate on a ship and losing the ability to swim, you know, like you imagine like you've been playing this character and say you're the guy that goes in the caves, the dungeon dive, and you're the first guy. Well, now you don't have dark vision no more.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So how you balanced the game was you focused on feats and you focused on taking away ability scores. So that's really an interesting component to your style version of what a One Piece campaign would be. Obviously, there's the traditional game style for what One Piece is. It's like a One Piece RPG that's out there on the web. You guys can look that up. But I always find it interesting to hear how other people homebrew stuff. Like, for example, when I did Monster Manual, it was very different than what I imagined someone else would have came up with the same conclusion with using like trying to use as much of the D&D book as well, focusing on like the monsters that were exclusive to the Monster Manual, upgrading them, giving the abilities. You've actually, Cody was playing that campaign off screen for a while before we actually transitioned. So it was interesting to see how things transversed as I continued to like adapt the style. So yeah, I think overall, it's very interesting to hear how someone implements different elements into a D&D story. So the last thing I kind of have to ask, why would someone want to play this style of campaign, given that, yes, it would give them elements of fantasy and role-playing that they're used to getting, but obviously it's a different style campaign. Why would this be interesting for someone who maybe is new or experienced as a DM trying to find a new way to create a content?
I think that this way of a campaign is a lot of fun because one, like I get bored sometimes, like when I play in a campaign and it's like you're stuck in this one city forever, you know, and you don't get to travel, you don't get to see anything. And then when you finally get to travel, you don't get your stuff back. Because what are the odds of you actually make it back to the house? 0. Like, you know, you got this giant world that, you know, the DM creates for you. You know, I mean, like, you're talking like it take you months to get all the way up here and, you know, months to get all the way down here. And you're right smack dab in the middle. On the ship, you can kind of zip around and go to different places. Yes, it'll still take you a while, you know, but like we've all done like, you know, the camping and stuff like that, like on the road where it's like, oh, you might get attacked by bandits, you might get stuff like this. Well, the bandit attacking, it's another ship attacking, you know, and that's new resources and stuff like that you can get. You know, you can have ship combat.
Ooh, so how'd you do ship combat?
So ship combat, essentially, we would just do, you know, it was kind of simulated at first. Like, this is just kind of what's going on because, like, they don't really, you're too low level to be, like, trusted to work cannons or different things like that. But in the player's handbook, there's actually ship characters.
Yes, there are ship components.
Like stat points, you know, the hull, different things, and different parts of the ship have different attacks. And that is very intense. So if you're an experienced DM and you want to be able to really go into that, you can. But if you're a newer DM, but you really like this style, you can just kind of simulate, you know, like the roll-off aspect that you do where we roll like 5 D20s and like highest score, take the lowest out.
Yeah, that's one of the favorite things that I've come up with. It was just, it's so much fun because it just adds so much more randomness to it. Yeah, that makes sense. So then so if your players had progressed to a higher level, then the expectation was then they would be the ones controlling or maneuvering the ship. And then obviously taking commands of how they were going to be doing their attacks.
Because I actually wanted to see how they would develop with the crew, because either they would stage a mutiny.
Okay.
And then they would be the captain, or they would eventually, something would happen, the ship would leave them, or it'd get blown up, and then they have to essentially start their own crew and make their own way from there.
And see, that's probably the route I would have gone. If I was a member of this crew, obviously being the bottom of the barrel, you want to learn as much as you can, but probably like in the, you know, like right around like level 5, level 6, where I feel like I would have probably had like a little bit of experience, understanding, established my crew, created my social network, as it were. I definitely would have started pulling people away and being like, hey, look, we have enough funds now to basically afford our own ship. It might be small, but I think this is where we go. So then world building wise, did you use the traditional One Piece world, or did you sort of create your own? Did you focus on the Grand Line and that strategy, or?
So there was like a Grand Line aspect of it, but I focused more along like they didn't really like they knew it existed, but they didn't get anywhere close to it because I had them kind of island hop around because I essentially how I built this world was I built like a one shot that was just it's a one shot that take at least 18 hours of playing hard all the way through.
Okay.
Where I had different worlds of different people because just like in the One Piece campaign, like I had a Tabaxi Island. I had an elf island. I had a dwarf island. I had like different races of people, and they all had different things that they were kind of known for. So like we could go to different areas and island hop, like, and they would spend days there at a time, learning different things like that. Getting better gear. Combat, different stuff like that. Like there might be a tournament they can go fight in. There might just be a resort to hang out, like when we did that resort at yours, where it's just games and it's just fun.
The opening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I named this island called the Opening in Cody's first campaign, and it was essentially supposed to be like a spa vacation spot. There were a bunch of adventurers who were doing these dungeon delves into these different ruins. Magic wasn't prevalent in this world at the time, and so the only way to find magic was to go into these ruins, experience it, go through traps. Very much a dungeon crawl style campaign, and they were given a break. They were basically looking for the Affinity Stones. It's basically how I described them, very openly, because this was off camera. So essentially they did that, and on the opening they just had games, and it was fun. I do like the whimsical aspect. I would say that if you were to do this again, what were some things that you would have liked to incorporate from the traditional One Piece story that you really didn't delve into? So, for example, like for me as a One Piece fan, I would love to go to the Grand Line.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to travel the same tier and get the One Piece, because ultimately, like, that's the whole goal of One Piece, and I want to be a part of that story.
Well, I mean that is the goal of One Piece, but that's Luffy's goal. There
True.
are all the other goals that they work towards and different things like that, between like finding the all blue, becoming the greatest swordsman, drawing that perfect map, which I think that is the most like random awesome thing. Like you want to draw a perfect map of the world, like that is so random but so cool at the same time. Like just to throw, because it's like and I made sure like with my characters, like they really had to think of something. Like don't tell me you want to be the number one fighter in the world. Like that's boring. Like I want you to really think about like something off the wall that's going to be like being the number one, number two. Like, okay, that's random, but I can work with that.
Oh, no. So the reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to be able to fight Luffy in the OG pirates of like all of the One Piece world. I wanted to eventually just be able to fight all those characters in game. Because again, I understand the uniqueness of, again, with Monster Manual, I didn't use any of the traditional creature or like NPCs from the Pokemon world. So I completely understand the route that you were going with that. I was just saying the style of like there's obviously like merfolk people. I would love to just like,
I had some Tritons. I made the greatest side character. He was like the first mate for the pirates. His name was Octavius Many Hands. He was a merfolk that was very depressed and pessimistic and played the clarinet all the time.
Oh, so he's Squidward.
Yes. I made Squidward Tentacles as Octavius Many Hands, and everyone's like, this is the best. Like, he literally would escort them around, like, on the island, and he would just, like, hang out in the tavern and just drink and be depressed all day. As Squidward would do.
That's so great.
But, like, the one thing I was really excited about doing was incorporating the hockey at higher levels.
Ooh, okay.
So, but we didn't get to that one. But the hockey essentially was going to be your spell or sorcery skill point slots.
Okay.
So like as a sorcerer, you can expel 2 sorcery points and you can regain a spell slot or something like that. Essentially, that's what I was going to make hockey go into, because, devil fruits, anyone can use those at like, beginner level. Like that's super, like Luffy had zero clue what hockey even was until Rayleigh explained it to him, and like was showing him those different abilities. And lo and behold, Luffy has one of the best hockey abilities to conquer his hockey. But with this, it would be really cool, like to be able to expel a sorcery point or something like that to get like an extra attack, or to get a spell slot back so you can cast that, super awesome fireball one more time.
Okay, so essentially, incorporating hockey as a point system. So
Mhm.
you get hockey points versus that you can use. It. How many would you get per long rest, or how would you
Like
incorporate?
you'd be able to like to get like 1 or 2 back per long rest, but like it would be like a leveling system because like when you first have hockey, like it takes all your focus and ability to use 1 point, and then it would eventually progress just like you. It'd be like almost like a second level
Yeah, yeah.
leveling system for you.
So would you essentially, because one of the biggest things about hockey was that it shortened lifespans and it focused on like eating away people's like physical lifespan. That's why when Luffy goes like gears,
Mm-hmm.
he's literally losing lifespan. Did you think about using levels of exhaustion as like an off put
Yes.
for people who are like, for example, hey, you only have 2, you could use a third one, but you're going to take X levels of exhaustion or something like that. So that way you can reward people, but also punish them if they decide to abuse your system.
Exactly.
Um,
I was definitely looking at things like that to incorporate either exhaustion or just like with the devil fruit. Like, say you ate the max all 5, at that 4th one, you might lose like 10 permanent hit points.
That'd be wild.
But is that worth it?
Yeah, could you imagine like your version of Blackbeard basically just being like fully feeded out, and he's just like, yeah, guys, I have 15
Health
feats.
points.
I have 15 feats, but I also have 15 health points. But I'm a fighter, so I just put all of my abilities in con, and so it didn't even mitigate that much. Losing 15 health points was fine. I just accepted that, and I'm still at 155.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's really awesome. I really like the elements you incorporated. I like how you were able to combine both the traditional D&D storybook with a little bit of the elements from One Piece. We're gonna go ahead and close out this episode here. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you guys next week on the Resource Gatherer podcast.